I'm hesitating because I grew up in a political world and I worked in state government for 8 years. And there's some part of me that likes to direct my energy into political choice. I don't think I'll do that today, but I will say, well, I'll tell you a quick parable which will say it all. I worked for the governor of California, Jerry Brown, for 8 years during his first 2 terms. And for 4 years, I ran the Arts Council, and for another 4 years, I was a member of it. And when I first got on, I had come from the radical counterculture, and I was really angry about the ways we had been ignored. My theater was on the cover of the Chamber of Commerce magazine in San Francisco, but they would never give us any money. And all the money went to the opera and the symphony and ballet. So when I was appointed to the council, I thought, payback is hell. And I decided to seek my revenge. And I began favoring the community arts and calling opera, symphony, and ballet the empire arts and threatening their funding. And within about 6 months, I'd managed to paralyze the state. I had all the people, they had all the power. And the governor called me into his office and he said, in a democracy, all boats rise or all boats sink. And I thought about that, and I realized that all these people were taxpayers. All these people had a right to see their cultural preferences expressed and to get nurture and support for them. And I realized that I'd been an ass and that it was on me to do something about it. So I publicly ate crow, and I went around to every one of the major institutions in the state, and I apologized. And I said, look, we're fighting over $1 million. Let's work together. I'll ask the governor to put $20 million in his budget. And I did, and he did. And I promised him that he wouldn't have to raise a finger politically, that if we couldn't win the budget, we'd failed, but he'd shown his true colors. So I went around to everyone, and I apologized, and I showed them a state plan that we, the council, had drawn up, and everybody would be guaranteed a certain piece of it: community arts, artists in schools, artists in prisons, opera, symphony, ballet. And the difference would be the difference between $2,000 grants and $200,000 grants. And that apology and the inclusion of everyone worked like a miracle. And the first year our budget went up from $1 to $5 million. The year that Prop 13 passed, and every state agency but mine took a 10% cut. Excuse me. By the time I left, the budget was $16 million. And many times, right-wing conservative legislators that I had met, visited, established relationships with, talked about hunting, fishing, disputed various political ideas in a civil fashion. These guys protected my budget. They voted against the legislative analyst who wanted to cut it, and they pushed my budget through, and then they voted against it on the record to protect themselves. And at my very last budget finance committee hearing in the Senate, there were 3 old senators, conservatives from the Central Valley. They were like the Mount Rushmore of the right wing. And I sat in front of them, and it was going to be my last time in front of them. And just before the hearing commenced, they all reached under the table and they pulled out hippie headbands and they put them on. And it was a very moving salute. It was an acknowledgement that I had learned how things work. It was an acknowledgement that they were giving me respect and affection. And I've carried that lesson, that political lesson, through to the present day. Shouting doesn't get us much. Millions of people in the street didn't end the Vietnam War, didn't prevent the Iraq War. doesn't prevent young black men from being shot by the police. What prevents those things is political power and aligning yourselves or ourselves with the broad mass of people and talking about things that matter to them. Health care, forgiving student loans, rebuilding infrastructure, ports, highways, airports, retraining workers who were displaced by globalism. The United States spends less per worker than any other industrialized country. And if we do that, it's like making an LP album. We can have a cut for gender. We can have a track for LBGQ. We can have a cut for whatever we want. But the cover should not be identity politics. The cover should be for the broad mass of humanity that we live with, whether we agree with them or don't. They're all expressions of emptiness. I may not like the fact that I'm made of the same stuff as Donald Trump, but it's true. And what it means is that when you talk to people, you can't talk to them as if the evil's out there and you represent goodness. Because there'll be some time when you're not. You lose your temper. You give the driver that cut you off the finger. That's very close to pulling a trigger. So these two descriptions for me are actually critical in living your life. Remembering that, yes, I have this feeling of an individual identity, but I'm also part of all of it. And I'll leave you with one little metaphor. Imagine standing on a cliff, looking at a choppy ocean, lots of little waves rising and falling. Each wave could be a named thing in the universe, could be a human being, a life that comes into form, exists in shape for a while, and then goes back to the ocean. Could be a civilization, could be dolphins, could be shooting stars. What the little waves forget, and what we forget, is that we've never not been part of the ocean. Not for an instant. So in the big picture, there's no you and me. We're both numerators on a fraction, the denominator of which is the ocean, is emptiness. And if we remember that, it'll change the way we treat every single person and every single thing on earth. The apple we pick is us. The dog we pet is us. He's a God. He's worth worshiping. Thank you very much.